Have you ever been in somebody's presence and literally just being in their presence heals you in some way? It encourages you, or it challenges you, or just lifts your chin a little bit if you're discouraged. Well, that happened to me recently, and I didn't have enough time to really complete the conversation with this woman, to spend enough time in her presence. And so I'm so excited to be able to sit down with her today. You are not gonna wanna miss this conversation, because I think that even on the other side of that screen, your chin is gonna be lifted, you're gonna be encouraged, your life's gonna be changed. So stay tuned for the chat with Priscilla. I was getting ready to open up our program by saying welcome, but I really hope I'm saying welcome back, because this is part 2 of a conversation we've already been having. If you have not seen part 1 of this episode, you need to go tinker around, find it, and watch it, because it really does lay the foundation for what we're going to be talking about in this next half hour. I met a beautiful woman and her husband, and just kind of fell in love with their story and fell in love with them and what God has done in their life, and the encouragement that they've been to other people. And so I just couldn't wait to sit them down and have some great conversation. Would y'all please help me to welcome Jay and Katherine Wolf to the program today?
Thanks for having us.
I am so glad you're here, and I love Hope Heals. Everybody needs to get their hands on Hope Heals, because it really does help you to redefine the beauty of suffering, to redefine sort of your perspective about life and eternal things, and just get everything in perspective. You guys have helped so many people to do that. Katherine, just sort of lead us in. Just tell us what happened when you were 26 years old.
Yeah, out of nowhere, as a 26-year-old, I had a massive brainstem stroke. Subsequently, 16 hours of brain surgery to keep me alive. And after the life-saving surgery, I became severely disabled because of the surgery. And
so it wasn't the stroke that caused the disability, it was the surgery.
Right, which is a little bit chicken or the egg for sure, but in order to preserve life, they had to take away a lot of function to my body. But I'm here, and I...
There you are.
I did have a baby just before. I had a 6-month-old when this happened, and had been married almost 3 years. And yeah, it's been a wild, almost 10 years post-stroke, and I've had 11 surgeries, and some have been really radical and terrible.
Yeah.
And I have had a severely broken leg after relearning to walk for 4 years. And a number of just really horrific things that Jay's been right by my side for.
Well, that's why I needed to get him out here, because I'm a Jay fan. Can I just tell you?
Likewise.
I'm a Jay fan.
Likewise.
I really want to talk to you about...
Me too. Likewise.
I really want to talk to you about...
Who is?
I want to talk to you about that day, Jay.
Yeah.
I want to ask, you came home. You weren't supposed to be home that day, apparently. It was an oddity for you to be home in the middle of the day while your wife's taking care of y'all's new baby. So just take me through that day from your perspective.
Sure. So we're from the South originally, but part of the reason we moved out was for me to go to Pepperdine Law School. And so we had this 6-month-old baby. I was finishing up. I'm in the home stretch of literally the last couple weeks of law school. And, it had been a hard season. Brand new baby, not sleeping, just classic, fighting about stupid stuff and just stressed out. And, we were at the same time anticipating just this new season of life. We're going to go start just a new chapter. And so all that sort of, in the background of this day that just is a very ordinary day. And I come home because I had procrastinated on a paper. So I do sometimes say procrastination, save your life. And God, of course. But, He works in all of our fumblings.
Yeah.
Nothing's wasted. And so it's just a really poignant reminder that, had I already had my paper done, I wouldn't have come home during this 45-minute window to work on it and print it out. And we lived on campus at Pepperdine, and so I popped up again during this window. The baby was asleep. Katherine was fixing some food in the other room, and then she just yelled, "Jay," in a way that I knew, something wasn't right, and ran in there, and she clearly was, in distress and on the floor, starting to throw up, and so I called 911, and they were there really quickly, and then took her on the stretcher out of that place that we had called our first home, where we had brought our baby back to, and where we became a couple together, and she says sometimes, like, go grab a toothbrush in case we're there overnight. Little did we know she would never see that place again, and that chapter of our life just slammed shut, like chapters do, and that day was April 21st, 2008, but whenever we tell our story, I just know that people all over are thinking of the day that their life changed, when they got that diagnosis or that phone call, and there's just this line of demarcation that runs through our history.
Before and after.
Can't ever go back across, but for us, that day was April 21st, 2008.
And then for 2 months, she just wasn't there.
Yeah, so...
I want to know, what are you doing, thinking, what's happening in the 2 months that she's unconscious?
Yeah, so before that, they took her to UCLA Hospital. We knew that UCLA was a college, but I didn't know if we had insurance, honestly, or, what the best hospital was. And again, just God was making a way through our chaos like he does. He's just going ahead, our forerunner, our anchor to our souls. And, just everything is just like slow motion falling apart all of a sudden. You have these dreams, and it's like, oh my gosh, am I following an ambulance down the Pacific Coast Highway with my wife in the back unconscious, and what is happening to my life right now?
Yeah.
And we come around the corner, and there's a giant billboard that says UCLA Medical Center, the best in the West, the #3 hospital in the country. And of course, this is where God brings us. And then I see on this Monday afternoon, I couldn't quite understand it for a second, but familiar faces, and so it was my church family. And we had just, sort of gotten really plugged into a church, almost uncharacteristically at 22. You're doing all these things, you're in grad school, whatever. But we had just
So you had your
decided
people.
to invest our life in it. We didn't know anybody in LA, and yet we had these people who were
there.
Close as family.
Yeah.
And so often I think when the bottom falls out, we want our invisible God to be made visible. And he's like, look around, my body
of Christ
is here. And that's what we had. And I'm telling you, I've grown up in the church, but I've never witnessed church like I did in that waiting room. And, again, it's pure worship is not when it's all going perfect. It's when it's all falling apart. Because then you realize, God, you're the only way out of this.
Yeah.
And that night, we gathered, the surgeon, I might add, that was on call, Dr. Nestor Gonzalez, world-renowned, known for taking on the hardest cases, just happened to be on call that moment, and knew that even having a lawyer as a husband is not a great thing for a doctor, trying to take on a big surgery. He's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think the Holy Spirit was saying to me to give her a chance.
You have to tell why, or I'll tell.
Yeah, go ahead. You weren't there, but you can tell. You didn't know.
There's you. I've heard
You did hear.
that when he didn't say yes to operate on me right at first. He assessed the situation, saw the x-rays, and decided he'd take 10 minutes to go back to his office. And Jay is standing in the emergency room holding the baby. And when Dr. Gonzalez goes back to his office, he says he could not get the picture out of his head of the young mother who this baby would not have anymore if she didn't try to save my life. So he comes, that's the Holy Spirit, putting that mental picture in his heart. Yeah. So he comes back out and says to Jay, I'll try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay, God.
So they took her to surgery, and it was going to be 8 hours maybe. So we gathered, like I said, in that waiting room, and about 100 of us gathered and just prayed, cried, laughed, sang, broke bread, pizza together. And it was just a slice of doing life together.
Yeah.
In all the highs and all the lows. And I grabbed a Gideon's Bible, all tattered, probably stained with a bunch of tears, frankly, in that waiting room, and read from Romans 8, which Katherine had memorized when she was little and loved that chapter. And, reading that, like the crescendo of that passage to say God's working all things for good and that nothing can separate us from his love. In that moment, I don't know if you all have ever read that passage in a really dark season, but it feels like a lie.
Yeah.
It's like, is this loving? Like, God, are you working
serious?
right now?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I may wake up tomorrow as a widower and my son without a mom, and like this doesn't feel very loving right now, and I remember sort of standing at that crossroads and saying, I can't just read this. Like, I'm going to have to believe it in a way I never have. I'm going to have to bet my life on it, and I'm going to have to bet Catherine's life on this promise that, God, you're working in a way I can't fathom, and somehow your love is going to be so close to me that it's going to change everything in this horrific tragedy. And that next morning, the sun came out, and the doctor came out. He hadn't even looked at the clock, and it had been 16 straight hours of microsurgery, during which, to save her life, he had to remove over half of her cerebellum. This part of her brain literally scrape against her brainstem, which is not good, as you can imagine, and damage and sacrifice a lot of the nerves that are vital to function. But he said, she's alive. We just don't know if she's going to wake up or be vegetative or locked in or paralyzed, but she's alive. And for some reason, that moment, just knowing God had spared her life, I felt like sort of the Israelites, like, you brought us this far. And like, I didn't know what we were up against, but like, I know you're gonna bring us all the way home.
Yeah.
And like that, again, it was a gift, it was a grace gift for God to say, like, here's a little glimpse of hope. And keep leaning into it.
What did that look like practically for you in those next, you got 60 days where she has not woken up.
Yeah.
And the doctors are telling you, we still don't know if she will or not. What were you doing during those 2 months?
I basically was just showing up every day.
Awesome.
It wasn't like super complicated.
Okay, just stop.
Yeah.
Stop right there. All right.
Yeah.
This is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Just showing up.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the husbands or wives that have walked out the door. They just didn't hang in there for much lesser, they're just not happy in their marriage.
Right.
Or their emotions have been kind of taken off in a different direction, or the future doesn't look like what they thought it would for their family because their spouse, the way they chew bacon just drives them crazy.
Exactly.
Just lesser issues that would make a spouse bolt. I'm trying to get you to help us to understand what makes a husband, because it's been 13 years now, right, that you've been married,
Right.
and 10 years since this has happened.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to know, what does it look like for you to stay? What does that choice entail, the hardship of that choice?
Right. I think
The deliberateness of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers, of course. And I think one was there was a community around me to say, you're not doing this alone. And I think so often, in our shame, in our own sort of motivations to step away from things we promised, we get isolated and we get alone. And then, all of a
It's more
sudden it's
comfortable
like,
there with nobody else.
Wait, you're gonna get divorced? Like what? I didn't even know because I haven't seen you and you've been distant or whatever. And I think in our situation, there were so many people who were like, y'all aren't going anywhere because we're not going anywhere.
Right.
And it was, again, the body of Christ that shows up. We talk about compassion and it's so watered down, but real compassion is to suffer with somebody, like the passion of the Christ, so compassion is like to suffer with. And I think that is, again, the gift that we get to give each other when the bottom falls out, not our platitudes of like, oh, God's good and working. Like, that's true, but like not now. Like, don't tell me, like, I need you just to come and be with me and maybe cry and just be present. Give me the ministry of presence. And that's what they gave us. And so it allowed me to show up.
Give tears, not truth.
Yeah.
Timing is everything.
what time?
Give people the
Compassion.
tears.
Yeah.
So I think, it was really knowing like I wasn't alone. And then I just sort of saw Katherine as doing the hard work. I was just having to show up in a way that helped her know she wasn't alone.
Yeah.
I wasn't fighting for my life. I mean, I might as well have been in a lot of ways, but I felt like the least I can do is just help her know this is not a fight she's going through by herself. And so that, for me, that was just what I felt like I had promised to do. It didn't seem very heroic. It just felt like what, like this is my other half. Like, of course I'm gonna show up. And
Jay, were you, at any point over these 10 years, have you had to wrestle through just being straight up, flat out angry? Angry that this is not what you had planned.
Yeah.
And had to wrestle with that with God. What does that look like?
Oh, sure. And I think it's, again, Katherine says, like, there's so much joy, but that doesn't invalidate the struggle, too. And joy is a struggle to get to. It's not an automatic, and it's a practice to say, like, I'm going to fake it till I make it sometimes. And our culture doesn't like that. They're like, that's inauthentic. You should, whatever you're feeling should be the ultimate truth.
That's so true.
And I think there's a great freedom to just realizing so often Jesus is like, just do the loving thing. And then you'll actually start to feel loving too. Sometimes it's the reverse, but more often it's that just the rhythm of showing up.
Yeah.
And when you hear in the Bible, like when people's hearts got hardened, like it was never good after that, right?
Yeah.
So a big prayer was always like, when my heart's starting to get hard, and it's little micro crystallizations. It's not big things necessarily, but it's just annoyances.
I love that, micro crystallizations.
But it's like over time, it starts to potentially get hard. And so there was a prayer in my life through the frustrations or the anger, or why me? Like this is, my life is now on a totally different course. That prayer just gave me a soft heart today. Like, let me see my wife not as some patient or some problem, but just as the love, this loving other half of my life that God has given me for a reason, not that's holding me back, some ball and chain nonsense that people say, but that this is the stewardship that God has given me to lift this woman up in every way that I can, even if it means putting whatever I thought for my future aside for this season or forever,
Yeah. What does it look like to take care of Katherine in your daily life? What does your day look like, your life look like in taking care of your wife?
It's gotten less and less physical. I was so grateful when Katherine could start to do her makeup again because I did it so badly.
You've been doing her makeup?
It was shameful.
Oh,
It was adding insult.
Let's thank you, Nikki.
Insult to injury. It was like, I will do this for you, but I feel like I need to watch a lot of YouTube channel videos about it.
And there are some tutorials.
I'm not really into that.
Yeah, totally.
I was happy to try. Anyway, as Katherine has progressed, it's presented different seasons of need, and thankfully Katherine, as you can tell, gets around, and she's got this just grit
Got a
and
little
fire.
spunk,
She's got a little spunk, and
But he's not. I know you feel funny saying this about me, but no, I mean, he does everything.
Tell us about that. I can tell he's trying to pad it.
He's so sweet. He's not going to tell you. Like, he has to get me in and out of the bathtub every time I take a bath. I can't stand to shower, so anytime I bathe, it's up to him to get me in and out. I can't drive. He drives me everywhere, which, can you imagine not driving when you have kids? It's really hard. He literally, if I stand up from the wheelchair, he is moving me into a different seat, pretty much instinctively at this stage, nonstop. I mean, he's essentially working to make my life happen. Whenever we're together, which is always.
And of course, there's a challenge to that. And I mean, there's so many caregivers in the world that I just empathize with. I mean, they're my people. So often, people with disabilities are really invisible, 20% of the population. Yeah. And the largest unchurched people group, I might add. And so if they're invisible, how much more so are the caregivers? Right. And so often people say, I love Katherine's story, I love her book. I'm like, I wrote more of that book than her, but no worries.
Yeah,
also, it's my story too.
It is your story.
It's our family story,
Which
right?
is why, let me tell you guys, this man right here was trying to not be on the show today. And I was like, I just don't think I'm gonna let you get away with that, because this is so much your story. Wow. This is so much your story, and the reality is, like you said, that the caregivers have to make hard, daily, deliberate, intentional choices about humility, about servanthood. Christ-likeness is just all over you.
Well,
it's all over you.
Thank you. It feels, again, just not very heroic, but just sort of doing what I promised. You know, we all promise on our wedding days, probably when we're 22 and totally stupid and not even thinking about anything real.
Right.
Like, wait, what did we just sign? What was that contract again? And, you know, Katherine literally had under her veil this microscopic, from
Time
birth, bomb that was going to explode. But all of us, we promised to stick with somebody we don't know. We don't know what their future will hold. We don't know what we're marrying into. And yet, and this has been a big way to re-narrate, you know, again, so much of our story is not what happens, but just how we react to it. How we re-narrate it. Not to revise history and not to like own the reality, but just to say, I have a choice of how I experience this. And so either I'm like, oh my gosh, we promise, you know, for better and for richer and for health and what forever. And it's
all
like,
the good stuff.
But it's like, you know what? Are there more beautiful words to ever speak to another human than for worse, in sickness, for poorer, till death, like that? Like she said that to me.
Yeah.
And I said that to her. And so we get to live out that thing that God says to us, like, you can run, I'm coming with you. Like, you can't go anywhere that's too far from my love. And like, that's in our own little broken way, we get to say that to each other. And, you know, with the rhythms of caregiving and also being a patient, it's hard to be a patient, not just, you know, it's a two-sided struggle.
Yeah.
To just say like, you know, God's given us this opportunity, not a tit for tat, or you're meeting my needs, or my love tank's whatever. That's like, who cares? That's not, you know, it's not gonna always be equal. In fact, it may really more often than not be equal. And the reality is, God, this is my little offering to you. And
That's beautiful.
in working out like this thing, like the love you have for your church, like I get to just model that in my own, really pitiful most of the time, messed up, griping, but like I'm gonna show up and try to love Katherine like you love us. And like, it's not because she's earned it or whatever, and she's the best patient, I just have to say. Like, a side note, but when this woman was, you know, had the tubes coming out of her brain and body all over and witnessing her child not being her child anymore, she would smile and she would pat the ICU nurses who couldn't find a vein and who, I mean, excruciating pain. And what was inside of her was just good and kind. And to see, just to witness her rise up with such grace and grit and beauty to the people who were, you know, causing her a lot of harm and pain really made me want to do the same, you know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, she would tell you she's not perfect. I won't either. You know, I'm like, we haven't been made saints because this happened to us.
I know, yeah.
Normal
Yeah, well,
people.
you're still, you're regular life, regular people.
But I will say one kind of funny story. Every night, so Katherine has facial paralysis. So her eye doesn't close.
They know.
What are you talking about? Beautiful. But one of the weird things is that her eye doesn't close. So if your eye is not getting moisture, it can get infection and you could even lose your eye. It's pretty serious. So every night, maybe we've just had a rockin' fight, or just, you know, we're annoyed at each other, or just like just tired. And I just have to come alongside and hold her face and doctor up her eye, you know, every night and make sure it's good for the night. And somehow, like I said, in that acting in love, even when you're not feeling it, even that simple
It mends
rhythm
and
has
heals.
just given healing and softness to the heart. And so anyway, it's just the little details God has allowed in our life have allowed us to flourish within the constraints of this story.
I really love what you've just suggested, because I don't know if you kind of recognize that or not, y'all, but he really just gave us a tool. Those of us who are in relationships and marriage, he's given us a tool to sort of restore and mend. If somebody can be humble enough to go to the other one, and whether you feel like it or not, and just be kind. It's something they need, just do it anyway.
Yeah.
In small little steps, you know, go despite the argument and do it anyway. That act in and of itself, you're saying, repairs a breach from earlier in the day.
Right, and I think C.S. Lewis talks about this on kind of the opposite side, and he was talking about the Nazis. He's like, they didn't hate the Jews originally, but they acted in hate toward them for so long that they really started to hate them. And so the converse is true. You know, you can act in love,
That's awesome.
and then it will change your heart. It's incredible. But again, in marriage, you start acting hateful, you're gonna start to hate over time. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But we can take, again, with humility, take ownership of that and say,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm not feeling it, but I want to feel it, God. I'm going to put my pride down and stand up and do something that I know is loving and serving. And the other caveat, though, I think about the prodigal son story, right? And I think about the older brother. You know, we always want to act like we're the good father. Like, no, you're the prodigal, you're the brother. Like, you're all we like to project ourselves into the God role often in the story, and it's not the right way. Anyway, so the older brother, I'm thinking, reading into it a little bit, but he stayed, right? And it sounded like he was pretty happy that he stayed, especially compared to his brother. And I have a feeling, though, he left in his heart long before that. And so I never want to just stay in body and not in heart, too. And that is the work. You know, I can stay, and it would be really hard to leave at this point. You know, our son, I'd be like, "You ever gonna, divorce him?" We haven't yet. No, we're never. We're in.
Well, at this stage, it'd be kind of intense.
But the
we're never above it, though, golly.
But the tragedy is to just stay in an empty body, and without a heart and a soul, wanting to be as one. And so anyway, that's the daily work: the softening of the heart and the being present.
And you should tell Priscilla what's kind of the update in terms of you staying, you continuing to love our family.
What's
Well,
the update?
Well, so Katherine, many medical issues, 11 surgeries, all that. I mean, she had a separate brain issue, an aneurysm, that the same doctor, Dr. Nestor Gonzalez, removed. And then after that was removed and she was cleared, she got pregnant and had a baby, a miracle baby.
Yes, she did.
So you like that segue, how we...
I like that segue.
I was trying to figure out how to...
That was our big ending.
That's
It's the
awesome.
coolest thing ever!
So now you have James.
Unbelievable. So James, and then of course we just had to have James and John because it was
James and John.
biblical.
How old is John?
He's
John
2.5.
2.5. And what's neat is John, is the Lord has been gracious, is the name. And then his middle name is Nestor for Catherine's neurosurgeon, Dr. Nestor
That's awesome.
Gonzalez. And what's really cool, so we were like, look, it's a little non-traditional, but who cares? It's, he actually isn't married, doesn't have a family, and so it was our way to just say thank you. He wouldn't be here without you. And we looked up later what the name means, and it means homecoming, remembrance, and seeker of miracles. Is his middle name, So when people are like, Nestor, that's different. He's like, well, here's
perfect.
my story.
That's right.
And it's the gospel story. It's
and so
new life.
Was that pregnancy hard for you, challenging for you?
In some ways it was for sure. And when he was a little baby, it was very scary to feel like, can I even hold him with all these problems? And yet, I did not ever fall while pregnant or when he was in my arms as a newborn, which I fall a whole lot. I do not have balance, and yet somehow my feet were firmly planted on the ground that entire pregnancy, the entire time he was a baby. Now he's 2.5, and being a disabled mother is so hard. I can't even tell you. I just wanted to pray for me. I'm not sure I'm going to survive, but
You will.
it's been incredible. But what I wanted to add to his name that you were saying that is so powerful is his first name is John. We call him John. And John, I think it's not chapter 9, verse 3. The story of the blind man? And I think it's John 9:3. It said, this occurred so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And I just think it's so beautiful that our baby John is here so that the works of God might be displayed in him. I just think that's too powerful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I am unbelievably grateful that you guys would share with us like this. I mean, seriously, your life is such a testament to the grace of God, the goodness of God, the power of God, the stability of God, the strength of God. And it is encouraging to all of us. Nobody's going out of here complaining tonight, I'll tell you that. And nobody that's gonna watch this program is gonna walk away and not reevaluate the way they're perceiving the struggles of their life because you guys have shared with us today. Would you guys please thank them for being on the program?